welcome back to the third in our special, literally on the road, drive home reviews, going from Queen Bees from Omaha, Space Jam in Cherokee, and now Black Widow on the road back to Tennessee. So welcome back. All right, so let's talk about Black Widow. We had a lot to say about it last night.
Well, we did. So this is the end of July. It was literally the last day of July. Today's the first day of August.
Yep.
So it's been out for
at least a month.
Yeah, a while. But we wanted to see it together. So this was the first chance that we really had to do that. So, yeah.
So the word's already out. Everybody who has anything to say about this movie has already said it. So we're going to get our 2 cents in.
It was kind of nice though, because we were the only ones in the theater.
I know,
late show.
That's wonderful. Don't you love it when that happens?
Well, especially because I am a reactive viewer.
Yeah, and there was a lot to react to in this one.
Yes, so it was nice to not have to quiet myself while we were watching.
There were a lot of jumps and normal things that I don't feel like I normally would have reacted to, but for some reason, last night when it was silence, this suddenly the missile hit her car or something shit just.
Well, that's one of the things we talked about. You would get lulled into a sense of calm, and then nothing ever stayed calm very long. As soon as you were lulled into a sense of calm, then something happened to jar you out of that, and so I think that was the one scene with David Harbour where he's singing, they're singing Bye Bye Miss America Pie. He gets to the line about this will be the day that I die, and you think, okay, foreshadowing, but then something happens immediately.
Yeah.
And there's not long time for that. It's okay, something's happening right now.
So I don't think we need to tell you this is the first film of the Marvel Cinematic Universe released since the pandemic, originally supposed to be out this time last year, and of course pushed back. Black Widow's long-awaited solo outing.
Very long-awaited.
So what's interesting about this one, when you think about the first films in the individual series that make up the larger series, is that since we already know this person,
right?
Not only do we already know her, we already know how her story ends.
So there's not necessarily a lot of world building.
Yeah, where you're kind of thrown right into it, and I think I felt the same way about Captain Marvel when I saw it. Is that I feel like because of that, it kind of does away with the very tedious first character introduction movie cliches or formula,
right?
That you know kind of what has to happen as the film goes. This one says, no, you already know this person, you already know kind of what she's about, and let's just kick it into high gear. So this is her first solo movie, reuniting with her, not her real family, but a family, a group of other spies that she was pretending to be a family with back in 1995, I think said, when she was a kid. And they reunite to basically take down the rogue widow training program is the long and short of it.
Well, she's technically the rogue widow.
Yeah.
So the Black Widow training program would be a Russian.
Yeah. Well, I think by this point, the guy who's running it, he's operating it rogue. I don't think he's answering any government at this point.
I guess they don't really go into that.
Yeah. It kind of keeps it
neutral.
Yeah.
How did you feel like there was any plotting exposition? I know exposition is generally a big thing for you.
I thought it was one of the things the Marvel films do really, really well is if you're watching them all like we are, in the shows, you're always looking for those clues and those little links and whatnot. But what the Marvel films do well, and what nobody else seems to be able to get, is that they're also easy to watch if you've never seen any of them. And I feel this one They had a little bit of exposition just to kind of remind the audience you're watching this right after the events of Civil War, and the events of everything after that hasn't happened yet.
But I think they kind of trusted their audience.
Yeah, by this point, it's kind of like a Harry Potter film towards the end of its runs. They know their audience.
Right.
You know, so they give you a little bit of exposition, just
Lots
to,
of expeditions.
yeah, a lot of them, to kind of clue you in on where we are in time and space, and then they just kind of trust the audience to follow along. I gotta say, from like the very beginning, one of the things about this movie that really kind of caught me by surprise is tonally, it's very, very different than a lot of the other films in the MCU, especially the opening bits. This film is not subtle in its
allegory.
Yeah, the allegory of human trafficking, and especially of young girls.
Right.
It is not shy about it.
No.
And I will say, I was the opening kind of credits of this movie, they were uncomfortable.
Yeah. And it really did, like, it takes it into dark places.
Mm-hmm, very. Which you always knew was kind of the thing with Black Widow. They always hinted at it.
Yeah.
And they still leave a lot of it to your imagination, but...
And I think that it kind of suits her character, too. I think that is another thing the Marvel movies do really well, is that the movies suit the character themselves.
Yes, exactly.
Where, you know, Black Widow is, you know, she makes some comments, she's got a sense of humor, but she is a more serious, you know, she takes things more seriously. And, you know, I think that you couldn't have an Ant-Man style romp.
Yeah.
With Black Widow. It needed to have a more serious message to it.
But even in, and this is not a negative, this is just kind of an observation of it. But even in like the early action scenes, these are some of the most violent.
Oh my God.
And
yes.
painful to watch.
Especially considering that, what, 90% of the action scenes are women?
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of times when you have female action scenes, they, you know, take it easy on them. Like, they're not really intense, but these were intense scenes.
Yeah, I mean, there was one of the early scenes where Scarlett Johansson and, help me with the other one's name.
Florence Pugh,
great actor,
mm-hmm.
are being chased over the rooftops, and Scarlett Johansson falls off, and she hits every fucking building on the way down, and you're just like, oh,
yeah.
God.
Yeah.
And then they do this really great, intense chase scene, and the car crashes in it are so fucking violent.
I mean, it's like,
you're watching the last one going, there is no fucking way they survived that.
And you know,
no way.
I am not a chase scene person.
Yeah.
Like, my issue with the Captain America movies, like why they bore me a little bit, is because so much of them are chasing. And let's chase Bucky some more, you know? But I did not, like, I was entranced the whole way through. Like, I was, you know, I did not want to leave to go to the bathroom. Like, you know,
yeah.
like,
you know, but eventually I think as the movie goes on, it segues kind of back into the more fantastical Marvel, you know, the climactic battle scene falling out of the falling out of the sky.
So the one when they break David Harbour out of the prison was intense too.
Yeah, but I mean, so it gradually kind of moves back into that more comic booky style. But the opening, like the first 30-40 minutes or so, it's much more intense in terms of the violence, in terms of the like you say, the physicality, the filming of it looks very different from anything else. And again, these are not criticisms. I think this is what, as you said, this is where the Marvel films are really strong, because they each have their own visual style, they each have their own visual language, and
I think you start off the movie, well, I mean, besides the first opening sequence where you're introduced to the family dynamic, But like when you're introduced to modern day Natasha, and she's alone, and she's not making a lot of dialogue, and she's trying to figure out things, and then it builds to the end where she's with this group of people, and they're talking and they're communicating. Like there's such a gradual building up of everything, of the violence, of the plot, of the communication. Like it all builds up through that movie.
And so not only is this a Marvel film, so not only is this one of the very few, and we'll talk about that here in a second, as we were having a conversation about that last night, the very few female-led superhero movies.
Mm-hmm.
It's also
not even just in the Marvel universe.
Yeah, like period.
Yes.
But it's also one of the rarity in the female spy genre.
Yeah. Generally, a female spy movie is a comedy.
Or it's really like the film I remember thinking of a lot was one of the worst movies I saw that year. Matter of fact, it was my worst movie.
Oh, yeah.
Red Sparrow.
Yeah.
Which at the time a lot of people were thinking that it was an abandoned script for Black Widow. You know, that one was just that was just uncomfortable and disgusting the whole way through, you know, trying to be subversive about the genre. So it's weird to have like I say, that Bond style spy film. Yeah, she's watching Moonraker.
Yeah, it was
to basically tell you right up front, this is what we're.
And she was like quoting it.
Yeah.
It was really,
which I thought was a really. And I remember when when it happened, I'm like, okay, why'd they pick one of the worst, you know, Bond movies? And it was all foreshadowing because that's exactly what. You know, this film, not in fact it was one of the worst movies, but in the fact that it was building up to that very outlandish, you know, spy thriller kind of thing. So it's you don't see a Jason Bourne, a James Bond, you know, female-led spy film.
Really don't.
So this is now kind of breaking ground in that genre as well. And you were making some interesting points today about the costumes.
Well, several things. There were several things about it being a female-led movie that stood out to me. First of all, they have one conversation about halfway through about whether or not she's ever thought about having kids. But that is it. There's no discussion about love interest, boyfriends, you know. The only future plans is like Yelena wants a dog. Like it not only passes the Bechdel test, it kind of just I don't know, throws it into the ground. Like, you know, it's nothing about them trying to find a partner or to, you know, say anything about their living on their own. But also the costuming, I was thinking about it because I've been ruminating about this since we watched it. Yes, there were some tight suits that they used when they were fighting and whatnot, but there was no cleavage bearing. It didn't really outline the ridiculous superhero costumes that outline their breasts, you know.
It was functional.
It was functional. It was like a male superhero.
It was actually
costume.
in a lot of them. It was plated and armored.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
Unlike kind of her costume. If you go back to Iron Man 2 or the first Avengers, where it's literally like a body stocking. You know. You know, this one is like plated.
And I mean, Florence Pugh wore a vest most of the movie, so she was still even more so, which I thought was interesting, not only as a plot device, but as a way to differentiate their costumes.
And you know, it's interesting if you're talking about a couple things, kind of jumping on what you're talking about, going back to the love interests. You know, again, and I think the same thing with Captain Marvel, avoiding those first-time MCU introductory movies. There is none of that love interest. The male heroes always feel like they need that love interest character to give them validation.
Right.
You know, what the hell was Rachel McAdams' role in Doctor Strange? You know, what the fuck did she need to be there for? You know, but you have to give the male validation.
Right.
And they didn't have that. In fact, there were only 3 prominent male characters in the film And going back to your, kind of linking into what you're talking about in the costumes, the male body is different because the one male in a costume is overweight and can't fit into his...
David Harbour.
Yeah.
I love David Harbour. You're not a big David Harbour fan.
I will admit that I liked him in this role.
I loved him in Stranger Things, which you didn't watch Stranger Things.
Well, I
so-
watched about half of the first season and lost interest.
Like, I love David Harbour.
and
He's just like...
I don't blame him for that Hellboy abomination, but he was a part of it. So I don't blame him, but...
I just loved him in this. I thought he was the perfect amount of cheesy. A good foil, but helpful. Like
100%. I agree. I think again, the Marvel films usually cast really, really well.
Back to the costumes, because we'll get to casting in a minute. But the other thing that I noted, especially for a female superhero or spy movie, there's not a scene where she has to put on a sexy dress and seduce her way through a situation. Like, she did not have to use her sexuality as a weapon throughout the whole movie, and I really, I love that. I've got 3 daughters, and to have a movie to show them where a woman is just... she's not told throughout the whole thing that she's not powerful enough to do something. And in fact, she's getting the opposite messaging.
Yeah, they're telling her, no, you're actually better than we ever thought you'd be.
And then, the one time, the one guy she can't defeat, and she really basically gets to say, you weren't even strong enough to break my nose, and then smashes her own face into the desk. There was something about that moment that just was like, you're not even powerful enough to screw me up. I don't know. It was just, it was amazing. But yeah, the costuming, was empowering. It was about functionality. It was not about, trying to, and even the whole Black Widow, all of the Black Widows in the group, there was no implication that they were being used for their sexuality.
No.
The implication was that they were trained assassins,
Yeah.
So
yeah, there was no... it really went against a lot of... I found the film quietly subversive.
Right.
A lot of these things that we're picking up on, you're picking up on specifically, are not things that dawn on you right away.
Right.
When you see it, you're like, oh shit, you're right.
Yep. Because it's not preaching at you, but it's entertaining you the whole way through, and then you go back and you realize, wow, they did that without falling into any of these tropes that so many female-driven movies are.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't feel at all like there was any pandering to anybody, male or female.
No. And there was, like you said, so few male roles in this, which, just completely blows out of the water that you can't have a female-led movie. Because even the villains, with the exception of the big bad, but the villains were
all
female.
Women, yeah.
In the fights, they were female-on-female fights. Without it crossing the cat fight, Jello wrestling, kind of.
Yeah, it was what you would consider a Black Widow fight scene, because it was
amazing.
They were throwing hands and doing and countering and.
So let's talk casting. What did you think of the chemistry between Florence Pugh and...
Florence Pugh and Scarlett Johansson worked brilliantly together, to the point where
you would think they were sisters.
To the point where, and again, you don't know, it's a comic book world, and they're clearly building up this whole multiverse thing, so you don't know what's going to happen. But to the point where, if you're taking this as kind of as a one-shot, you're a little sad that you're not going to see them together in another sequel.
Right.
Because it's like, this is a great buddy team that work really well together. And I like they don't get in... Another trope they avoid is the fighting sisters.
I mean...
you were always so-and-so's favorite.
Right.
you know, they fight, but it is not a, you know, it's
like
not.
they're literal fighting.
Yeah, it's not.
Russia versus U.S. Like
You know, it's not a Thanksgiving dinner play where you come home and, you know, you stole my Barbie when I was 5 and I'm still mad at you. You know, Daddy always loved you best. It was none of that shit. They, you know, they behaved like actual sisters. They disagreed, but they
teased each other.
Yeah. It was a.
The running joke about Yelena teasing Natasha for the way she
poses.
Was great. You know, so and then again, like with the relationship between Rachel Weisz and David Harbour too. That was so totally believable.
Yeah, that was cute.
Like it was sweet. It was like because I mean I think Rachel Weisz is an excellent and underused actress.
Definitely, because I knew I'd seen her and stuff, but I had to look her up.
Right.
To go, okay, what has she been in? Oh yeah, that. You know,
yeah.
So.
Like I think that for her to be able to play basically 2 different characters in this, and even, I mean, when it gets to the point where you're not sure which side to choose on, it was like, I mean, I'm a pretty sharp person, and I was still like,
yeah,
okay, like having to follow along for a minute. I felt like the twists in this were amazing. What about Ray Winston as Dreykov?
An understated villain.
Right.
And it's one of those ones I'm not sure how to feel about. I liked his performance, and I liked the character. I don't like the character.
Well,
but,
obviously.
You know what I mean? You know, but it is such a vast difference from like other Marvel villains. Of all the Marvel villains, he's kind of the one that's rooted the most in reality.
Yes, because
you know, basically a sex traitor, essentially.
Like you could just you like just know there's people out here who exist like this, and maybe they don't have a magic ring that
or like a floating space station, you know, secret Bond headquarters kind of thing. So it's kind of, I don't know. When I first watched it, I was thinking, man, I wish they would have gotten someone a little bit more prominent for the role. But I think getting someone who's more realistic was definitely the better choice, because it worked.
And the way that he just like he had the slow burn anger too, like, where it was like, I'm gonna take it, I'm just gonna let this wash over me, and then get to the point where he's like basically, you know, punching her around because she's just finally hit his trigger, you know, like I think that there is a thing that powerful white men can do where they know that they have a certain power in a situation, and they don't have to get upset or angry about it until, like, you know, until that power is seriously questioned, because like they know nothing's gonna happen. I just enjoyed that. I enjoyed his takedown. It felt good to see.
It was very cathartic.
Yes.
I am going to say, so let me talk about one of the only thing I really didn't like about the movie. And this is a nitpick, granted. Okay. But if I had to say the only thing that I really didn't like about this movie is the handling of the on-the-ground villain Taskmaster.
Right.
Now, for those who don't know, again, everyone's seen the movie by now, but in the comics, the Taskmaster's thing is that, I'm going to refer to him as he, because he's a he in the comic, he can memorize people's fighting styles. So all he has to do is fight you once, and he can mimic everything you do. So that is a great setup for a Darth Maul on the ground, you know, final battle boss. You know, the fat Russian guy is your your master plan. But if you're thinking of a Bond movie like this is clearly supposed to be, you know, Taskmaster is your Odd Job or your Jaws. And I like the reworking of the Taskmaster character. I like that it's a woman. I have no problem with that. I just don't feel like they used the Taskmaster to the extent that they could have. I was looking forward to some long, you know, episode 1 style fight scenes of point and counterpoint and move and counter move. And I feel like just a lot of the fight scenes were very cut short or edited very short.
I don't know about that.
And
like, I don't agree with you necessarily on that, because the first fight scene when she's like Taskmaster and Natasha, like, that goes on.
Yeah, but that's the first one. You would think that then it would get more and more complicated as the film goes on.
But the character got complicated instead of the fighting getting complicated. The character got complicated.
Which again is a sign of Marvel films. One of the criticisms that Marvel films get that I don't agree with in most cases is people whining, you know, oh, the villains aren't strong enough, because they're not about the villain.
Right.
They're about the hero. They're not a DC movie.
Well, I mean, look at the villain from the first Avengers movie.
Yeah.
You know, he's got his own...
Yeah, he's got his own show.
Disney Plus show.
But I just feel like...
I think that they're not done with Taskmaster.
I hope not, because it's such a good gimmick.
As I think that we're going to see more, especially as the MCU universe, I guess that's redundant, the MCU gets wider with the input of the shows on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see more of her.
I hope so, because again, it's such a good gimmick.
But I really think too, especially because Natasha's no longer alive and no longer really part of the MC universe, I think that we needed that redemption. She was the redemption, because that was the one big, like, that's the, you know, killing that person early on has stuck in her craw, has given her guilt. It's something that, you know, she really, and for her to be able, like, at the end.
Well, I'm not debating the way she's used,
right?
Or you know, story wise. Like I say, I love the complete redesign and reimagining of the Taskmaster character. I'm just saying that from an action movie perspective,
see, though,
the Bond movie perspective, I was hoping for a little bit more final boss fight with Taskmaster, or Taskmaster getting more and more as we go, and I wanted more. I wanted more.
To me, Taskmaster is not your final boss. Dreykov is your final boss, and so the Dreykov fight and destroying him in the end, that is your final boss scene. The Taskmaster fight at the end is the redemption scene. You know, and Taskmaster tries to fight Natasha, but Natasha won't. Like, as soon as she can, you know, she defends herself, and then she won't fight back. She'll defend herself, but she won't fight back. She puts her hands up, you know, because...
Again, I don't disagree with any of that. I just think it's such a great gimmick for a villain and such a great gimmick for a fighter.
But that's the thing, is that this is not a gimmick movie.
I want to see the Taskmaster back. I want to see her kind of go full tilt.
Outside of the MCU, you know, this on its own. First of all, I think this is probably one of the best MCU movies that I've seen. Granted, colored by the fact that it excites me that it's female driven and it has all of those things that we've talked about. But also, as a standalone movie, this is probably one of the best action movies that I have seen.
It is definitely one of the best standalone action films. And especially within a series, within a larger series, within a sub-series, you know, however you want to look at the MCU. Kind of I don't know if they're going to do a sequel to this one. I imagine they will, because why would you give up on something that's made you money? But like we were kind of saying last night, I don't know quite where you go with the story for a second film.
you would have to go into a prequel situation,
Yeah.
which would take that relationship with Florence Pugh out.
Yeah.
So I don't.
Or again, with all these multiverse things, they're bringing in, bringing in a new Natasha, and they have to reestablish their bond, kind of thing.
I don't know. I almost want them to not do that.
I agree.
Because honestly, like, it took them so long, 20 years to get to a point where they were giving Natasha her own movie, which she has been like to me, she is the steadiest, most consistent character throughout the entirety of the cinematic universe. Black Widow was a dependable character that they could put into like almost all of the movies.
She was in Iron Man. She was in Captain America.
Thor?
I don't think she was in any of the Thor films.
I couldn't remember.
No.
But she's consistent across the universe.
I will agree with that kind of. I'll add kind of her and Hawkeye.
Right.
The human.
Well, and that's it too. She and Hawkeye are the only ones who are not working with any kind of either super intelligence or superpower or godlike ability or money.
Yeah.
Which is Tony Stark's superhero ability is he's rich
And he's brilliant.
Well, he is brilliant.
So it's not just the money. The money helps.
I think that
the money helps.
I think that Hawkeye and Black Widow are intelligent too. Like they have a different kind.
But
of intelligence.
they are they've always been, even from the very first Avengers movie, they've been the
human element.
The audience point of view character.
Right.
Them.
Yeah.
Work. I mean, that was Hawkeye's whole deal in Age of Ultron.
What I'm saying with this is that it's taken them so long to get her own movie, her own property. I don't want them to muck it up by forcing a storyline that doesn't fit with it. And honestly, I don't see Scarlett Johansson really letting that happen.
I don't either. They'd have to really... I think she'd have to sign off on coming back and really be for whatever. Yeah, and that's kind of the other thing to kind of mention about this movie and why I think this was a good movie and why I wish it didn't have to have the burden of the 2020 kind of hanging off it is, you ever feel like Black Widow kind of got the short end of the stick in Endgame?
Yeah.
Like her death happens about the midpoint, and then everything else happens, and by the end you're like, oh wait, she died.
Yeah.
She doesn't even get to be there for the big girl power.
I know.
Everybody marching to go fight Thanos thing. Which you feel like is a real cheat. So, this is kind of her payoff.
Right. And so I think that, like I said, to do a sequel with her character. Now, if they take Yelena, and I am fully behind taking Yelena and putting her into the Black Widow character,
which is
in the comics.
I mean, that's clearly what they're doing here.
Mm-hmm. And I'm as a Black Widow fan in the MCU, I am totally behind that. I think that she would be a good natural choice.
I think honestly, watching this, to me,
especially with the end sequence.
Yeah, with the end sequence, which is clearly setting up for Hawkeye's film show on Disney Plus. I think the main purpose of this film was, one, to give Black Widow a better send-off.
Right.
Give Scarlett Johansson a better send-off. And to firmly establish Florence Pugh as the new Black Widow.
Yeah.
This is going to be, which I would not be surprised if, kind of like Falcon and the Winter Soldier, if part of the Hawkeye show is not just him training Haley Steinfeld to be the new Hawkeye, is him kind of convincing her to be the new Black Widow.
Yeah,
because that seems to be the direction they're going in.
That would be my guess.
But
I mean, honestly, with those Disney Plus shows, I have been I've not really been able to predict what has been happening in them.
Yeah.
So, well, it was excellent
So, any closing thoughts before we get to final grades?
I was just so appreciative of the allegory of human trafficking with women.
Yeah.
And because that is such a big issue, and the fact that the Black Widows in the program, a lot of them, yeah, there were a few white ones, but the majority of the ones that you saw were women of color.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, most trafficking victims are women of color. So, like, I really did appreciate that.
Yeah, and like I say, it was. I was impressed by it, by the fact that they went there.
Yeah.
Because with a Disney property,
Yeah.
you know, they're always they'll go places, but they'll go there a safe way because it's Disney.
Right.
You know, and they have shareholders and amusement parks to fill.
But I was like, I'm always pleasantly surprised with how raw that they will get with the Black Widow character.
Yeah.
Well, and the part where Yelena is talking to David Harbour about, you know, having had a forced hysterectomy, and David Harbour is just like, oh, like having that man reaction of, oh, so gross, and she's like, what, come on, like, I mean,
you know, one other thing before getting to grade that just from what you said, something that I feel I want to harp on here, because this is something I've bitched about. You notice that it went there, it had a darker allegory, a darker story, and yet this film did not have to be rated R. It didn't have to have a lot of gratuitous gore. It didn't have to have them saying fuck every 5 seconds like people seem to think.
Which is funny because I couldn't count the amount of F-bombs you've dropped in this review.
Yes, but I never, the difference is, I don't do that and then make the statement I'm being mature.
Right.
You know, I don't put an R rating on and go, this film is so mature. It's for mature people. Come hear us say fuck. Woo, because we're in the 3rd grade. You know, this didn't have the Deadpool or the Harley Quinn film thing where it's like, let's make it R and make it really gratuitously gory, gratuitously over-sexualized, and have 3rd grade humor in it. Like, this actually was mature.
Yeah, there wasn't really, I mean, even with this, as intense as the fight scenes were, it wasn't super bloody fight scenes. Like, there's a couple of wounds. And,
which, you know, which we've seen.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that it was able to have mature allegory, a mature story, and it actually was mature.
Right.
Rating something R and putting the gore and a bunch of swearing in it doesn't make it mature.
Yeah.
You know, that's something I kind of appreciate. All right, so let's wrap this up. We've talked about this one longer than most of them. So final grade for you for Black Widow.
A+, no question. 100% extra credit for Bechdel test and non-sexualized costumes. So she gets 105%.
All right. I think we have a first.
What?
I think we have a first here. I believe this may be the first time we agree.
Really?
So I'm giving it an A+ as well.
What?
I almost deducted for my feelings on Taskmaster, but I feel the positives that it did and all the stereotypes and all the tropes it avoided more than make up for, you know, I would have liked to have more cool fight scenes.
Yeah.
You know?
Because they were cool fight scenes.
They were cool fight scenes.
There was no shortage of cool fight scenes.
There were. I just wanted more of it. I'm sorry. I'm a man.
Sexist.
I know. You know, but I can't see deducting points for that because I think it did a great job. I think it was well worth the wait.
Yeah, it was a perfectly complete movie to me. Like, I found it to be, yeah.
So yeah, all right. So there we go. The long-awaited review for Black Widow tells you, you know, you should have seen Black Widow, which you probably already did.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a little bit longer in our vacation time together. We're going to try to maybe do a couple other of these if we can. But this will be the last one kind of on the road.
Yes, finally going back home.
So, yeah. So thank you all for joining us. I know Drive Home Reviews always has like a long summer break, and then I upload like 4 or 5 videos all at once. But thank you all for joining us. Hope everyone's had a good summer. Let's get ready to go back. And as always, drive safe, and I'll see you at the movies.